I have buried friends. I have survived heartbreak. I have lost money, status, and people I thought would never leave. And after 80 years on this earth, I can tell you, nothing ever stole my peace the way I did. Every single time. Let me explain. I have buried friends. Time takes its toll on everything we hold dear. I have survived heartbreak I didn't think I would survive. I have lost money, status, and people I was certain would never leave. And after 80 years on this earth, I can tell you with complete certainty, nothing ever stole my peace the way I did. Every single time. Not life, not other people, me. Today I want to tell you exactly how I did it, so you don't have to wait until you're 80 to figure it out. There's something that happens when you cross a certain number of years. You stop performing, not because you stop caring, but because you finally run out of energy to pretend. At 30, you think you know things. At 50, you realize you don't. At 70, you start to suspect what actually matters. At 80, not arrogantly, but the way someone who has walked through fire knows what heat feels like. You don't explain it. You just know. I've had long stretches of real happiness, and long stretches of a quiet, restless misery, the kind that doesn't announce itself. It just sits beside you at breakfast, in the dark at 3 a.m. Almost all of that misery was self-inflicted. Through 7 specific mistakes I kept making on repeat. Let me tell you what they were. Mistake number 1. I spent decades waiting for an apology that never came. Someone in my life betrayed me. I won't say who. The who doesn't matter. But it was real, it was deliberate, and it cut deep. And for years I carried that wound like it was something precious. Like holding it was a form of justice. I rehearsed what I'd say when the apology finally came. I imagined the reckoning. It never came. The apology I spent decades waiting for, it just never came. And while I was busy waiting, and something was happening inside my body. Researchers at Hope College found that when people actively recall past grievances, their blood pressure rises, heart rate increases, and measurable stress responses activate, even when the original wound happened decades earlier. The body doesn't distinguish between a wound happening now and a wound being remembered. Every time I rehearsed that grudge, I was injuring myself, fresh, on schedule. The person I resented had moved on. They had ordinary mornings and evenings. Whether I crossed their mind, I genuinely don't know. But I know for certain my resentment wasn't touching them. It was only ever touching me. Forgiveness is misunderstood. It isn't saying what happened was acceptable. It isn't reconciling. It isn't forgetting. Forgiveness is simply deciding to stop letting a past wound govern your present peace. It is an act of self-interest, pure and complete. I wish I had understood that at 40. Mistake number 2. I confused being busy with being alive. This mistake wore the costume of virtue, which is why it was so hard to see. I was industrious, productive, always in motion, and I believed that story completely. But here's what I missed while being essential. My daughter learning to ride a bicycle. I was there physically. Mentally, I was composing an email. A Sunday in October with extraordinary light and wood smoke in the air. I walked through it on the phone. My father in his final years, wanting nothing more than to sit and talk, and me always with somewhere to be in an hour. A palliative care nurse named Bronnie Ware spent years sitting with dying people in their final weeks and documenting their regrets. The second most common regret, said by nearly every man she sat with, was this: I wish I hadn't worked so hard. I missed my children growing. I missed my own life. Busyness, I've come to understand, is often a sophisticated avoidance strategy. When you're busy, you don't have to sit with yourself. You don't have to ask, am I happy? Is this the life I actually chose? Do the people I love feel loved by me? Silence asks those questions. Busyness drowns them out. I was 68 before I let myself be truly, uncomplicatedly idle for an afternoon. Just sitting, not producing anything. The guilt I felt told me everything about how deep this mistake had gone. Motion is not meaning. Please don't confuse them. Mistake number 3. I let other people's opinions write my life story. Think of 5 people whose opinions most shaped your major decisions, your career, your relationships, how you presented yourself to the world. Now ask, how many of them are still actively in your life? How many of them regularly think about you? How many remember the specific things they said that you built entire life chapters around? I spent enormous energy living inside an imaginary audience's judgment. I chose work that looked impressive over work that felt meaningful. I stayed in situations I had outgrown because leaving required explanation. I muted instincts and opinions and true preferences because they didn't fit the version of me I thought others needed to see. The psychologist Mark Leary identifies what he calls the sociometer, the human brain's constant internal monitoring of social approval. It is evolutionary, deeply wired, and once necessary for survival. But in modern life, it goes haywire. We live entire lives in service of an approval system built for a world that no longer exists. And here is the cruelest part. At 80, I look back at the audience I was performing for, and most of them are gone. Some died, some drifted. Most were never watching as closely as I imagined. The people who loved me most loved me loudest when I was unguarded, uncertain, undisguisedly myself. Every hour spent managing your image is an hour not living your life. Please hear that. Mistake number 5, I chose being right over being close. I was good at arguing, measured, precise. I could find the flaw in any position automatically. I thought this was a strength. What I didn't understand is that being relentlessly right in your relationships is one of the most efficient ways to end up alone. There was a friendship, one of the oldest of my life, that didn't end because of hatred or betrayal or any dramatic rupture. It ended because of accumulated rightness. Years of small moments where I had the facts on my side and I used them, where I corrected, where I pushed back when letting it go would have cost me nothing. He didn't storm out, he just gradually stopped calling, and I told myself he was oversensitive. I was right, and I ate dinner alone for years. Neuroscience is clear on this. When a person feels repeatedly corrected or defeated, the brain registers it as physical threat. Over time, people don't consciously decide to distance themselves from someone who always needs to win. They just feel less safe, less willing to be vulnerable, and they drift. I ask myself now, when I feel the urge to correct, what am I protecting, the truth or my ego? And more importantly, what would I rather have, this victory or this person? In my experience, very rarely do you get both. Mistake number 6, I never learned to sit with myself. Most of us are quietly, persistently uncomfortable with being alone in silence. Not in a crisis way, just uncomfortable with no input, no task, no role to perform. I manage that discomfort with noise. The television always on, but never really watched. Social commitments accepted, not because I wanted to go, but because the alternative was an evening with my own thoughts. Busyness, which was, underneath everything, organized self-avoidance. Researchers at Harvard and the University of Virginia asked participants to sit alone with their thoughts for 15 minutes, or administer mild electric shocks to themselves. 2/3 of men chose the shocks. That is not a fringe finding. That is a window into how unbearable many people find their own unmediated inner world. And the tragedy, the things we flee in silence, the grief, the unanswered questions, the half-formed fears, they don't disappear because we don't look at them. They go underground, and they govern us from there. The peace I have now, genuine, settled, unhurried, didn't come from resolving everything. I haven't resolved everything. It came from finally learning to be with myself without running. Sit with yourself. Not to fix anything, not to perform reflection, just sit, breathe. Let yourself be exactly as complicated and unfinished and real as you are. Because the self you've been running from is the only home you will ever actually live in. Mistake. Number 7. I treated my body like it was someone else's problem. This is not a health lecture. I promise you that. You already know about vegetables and exercise. This is something different. This is about what it feels like at 80 to live in a body you didn't listen to for 50 years. The pain signals I dismissed as inconvenient. The exhaustion I pushed through with stubbornness. The sleep I sacrificed as proof of how hard I was working. The stress I wore like a badge. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk documented something that goes beyond physical health. Unprocessed emotional experience lives in the body. Grief you never sat with, conflict you never resolved, chronic anxiety carried for years. It accumulates in your muscles, your nervous system, your organs. The body keeps the score, literally. At 80, I feel the compound interest on choices made at 45, at 52, at 60. There is still time to make different choices, not heroic choices. Just the daily choices of a person who treats their body as a home worth tending, rather than a machine worth running until it breaks. Sleep. Genuinely sleep. Rest without guilt. Pay attention when something doesn't feel right. Your body is not a vehicle for your ambitions. It is you. Entirely, intimately, irreplaceably you. Let me tell you what my mornings look like now. I wake without an alarm. I make tea. I sit by this window. I watch the light change. Some mornings I think about the people I have loved. Some mornings, nothing very much at all. There is no performance I am preparing for. No version of me waiting in the wings to replace the one I actually am. Is it a perfect life? No. I have real regrets that will not be resolved before I die. Relationships with more distance than I would have chosen. A body that negotiates with me daily. But I am at peace. Genuinely. All the way through. And what I know now, with the certainty that only 80 years can give, is that this peace was available to me much earlier, not because life would have been easier, but because these 7 mistakes didn't require a certain number of years to correct. They required a decision, a willingness to look at how you are actually living and ask, is this the life I am choosing? Or is this simply the life that accumulated while I wasn't paying attention? You don't have to be 80 to choose peace. You just have to stop stealing it from yourself. I hope you start today.